If you're anything like most people, when your computer stops working, it might be a pretty tragic event. You might be wondering, what happened to all my data? How long is it going to take me to get back to where I was? Or I have more important things to be doing than this right now. Well, I might not be able to help you with the last one. But if your computer does crash, hopefully this video will give you a little bit of insight on how to fix it and maybe to figure out how bad the situation really is to help you sleep a little bit better. I just happen to be the lucky owner of a computer that recently stopped working. Not only am I going to get this up and running for myself, but hopefully it can provide some insight as to how you would go about fixing your computer. Of course, every problem is a little bit different, but the general rules apply for every case. So with that being said, let's get started. Now, before we start with the repair, you might be thinking, I don't have a background in computers. I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. I haven't taken a training course for this. Rest assured, neither have I. University courses do not prepare you for this kind of a diagnosis. And most of the people who do this for a career have not received formal training from a university, maybe a college, but a lot of them learn it on their own or on the job. And there's no reason why you can't as well. To start off with, we're going to have absolutely no cables attached to the box, and you'll want to leave it like this for at least 30 seconds. There are a few components in the computer that actually store electricity for a small amount of time, and if those are the cause of a problem, sometimes allowing them to drain will actually help solve your problem. So leave it unplugged for 30 seconds, and then we'll plug in two cables. The two cables that we'll start off with are your power cable and your cable for display. We're going to be looking for something specific here. We're going to be looking for a light that comes on, usually on the front of the case for power, and we're also going to be looking to see if the monitor down there, which is connected right now, and the power is on. We're going to be checking if there's a video signal. If there is, then we already know a couple things are okay. And I'll be talking about that in a second. As you might have been able to see, when I press my power button, there's absolutely nothing that happens. I don't hear any sounds, and that's another thing you'll be looking for. If you can hear fans start to spin, that usually means that it's trying to power on, but something is preventing it. You also might have seen there's absolutely nothing on the monitor that's changed. So if you're worried about your data being lost, this kind of a problem is actually sometimes a pretty good sign. Usually it means that there's another component that's failed long before it actually gets to your hard drive, which holds all of your data. The computer I'm working on is slightly older, and on this computer, there's a latch that you can pull to remove the side panel, which I'm going to do right now. Here you have the power supply. Sometimes it's on the bottom over here. It supplies power to all the components on your computer. You won't see these in all modern computers, but these are optical drives, and sometimes below there you'll also see a floppy disk drive if your computer case is quite old. Right here are the hard drive bays. There might be multiple of these in different arrangements. This is a graphics card. Your computer may or may not have one as well. This is an older model heatsink and fan. On newer computers, they'll look different, but they'll be easier to usually see around than in this model. And underneath it all, the green board here is the motherboard. There's a couple pieces I'm going to point out to you that might be useful for later. This is your CMOS battery. There's a couple of reasons for it. First of all, to keep the time on your computer always going, and second, to make sure all of your settings stay saved once you turn it off. And right here, there are 4 sticks sticking out of the motherboard. These are your RAM. When we turned on the computer earlier, there was absolutely no sound and nothing to see from the front of the computer to show that there was a sign of life. I'm not sure if that came through very well, but that's the sound that the power supply makes. So there is a small fan that's inside these, and it'll start whirring to life. So that sounds good so far. Now this here is a little bit more concerning. There's an LED on the board that's flickering slightly, and flickers are very rarely a good thing when you're referring to computers. A power supply's job is to prepare electricity from the wall and turn it into something your computer can use. A motherboard's job is to disperse the power to all the components that need it. In this case, what we're going to be doing is removing the power supply, replacing it with a different one, and seeing if that works better. You might be asking why I'm doing this instead of the motherboard, if it could be either of those components. We're going to be choosing the power supply in this case for a couple of reasons. First, the availability of parts. I have an extra power supply. I don't have to buy an extra one to test. Second, power supplies are known to fail a little bit more often than motherboards do. Third, the part is easier to take out than the motherboard. There's a lot of stuff plugged into this right now. And although there's a lot of wires going to the power supply, the connectors are easy to take out, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now we do need to remove all of the plugs connecting the power supply to all the peripherals. However, instead of putting in the new power supply directly in that spot, we'll just leave it on top and make the connections so that we have less work to do in case that's not the issue. Now I forgot to do this, but it's a good idea to disconnect the power supply before you unplug any of the other cables. So this is the power supply we're going to be using as a replacement. I've pulled all the wires that I can to the side, and we'll just be plugging in all the connectors. It might be a little bit hard to get in there because the cord sizes are different, but we'll do the best we can. This connector provides most of the power to the motherboard. This connector provides additional power to the motherboard, usually goes in a different area. These types of connectors are both used to connect peripherals, so either hard drives or disk drives. But because we just want to make sure it powers on, we don't even need to connect them at the moment. All right, so there's a jumble of cables, but we have the two main connectors that we need, going to the motherboard, the small and the large one. Now it's time to connect it and see if it powers up. Already something I noticed happened. When I plugged it in, the computer sort of did a little self-test. It spun up the fan on the graphics card for a second, and in the corner, the light is actually not flickering anymore. So this is a good sign. Time to press the power button and see if it works. All right, and it does. So I've turned off the computer and removed the power cable. And now we're going to have to do a couple more things to make sure that everything is working. I'll be starting by plugging in the peripheral power connectors into the hard drives. And that should be enough to get us working because we don't really need a DVD drive at the moment. So because this computer is used as a server, there are a number of different hard drives in the unit, but the only one that's needed for boot is this one here, and I already know that. So that's the only one we need to plug power into technically. If you just bought your computer and you haven't built it yourself, there's a good chance that there's only one hard drive in your computer. There might be a disk drive as well. So there's only two things that you'd need to plug in. All right, so off camera, I have a video cable plugged in. I'm going to be plugging in power. And I have my monitor connected as well. So if this turns on, we should be able to see what's next. All right, so as you can see, the computer's monitor is powered up and it is working now. This probably means it's going to be the end. Considering nothing was working before, and usually because only one component will fail at a time, this probably means that I know what the problem is, I have a replacement for it, and now all it means is I have to reinstall this into the same area as the last one was. So I have to take out the old, put in the new, and I should be good to go. After connecting, of course, all of the different peripherals. There's one part I left out of my description earlier, and that's the CPU. It rarely goes wrong, so it's not really one of the biggest culprits, but it is underneath this heat sink, which is either a copper or aluminum block. There's 4 screws holding in the power supply now that all the cables are rerouted. I'll be taking those out next. Now I should be able to just slide this out. All right, time for a new one. So I'm just finishing up with the reinstallation here. Almost all of the cords are plugged back into where they need to be. And it's a good idea for me to run the system right now. If something's not working, it's really annoying to have to go back from here, undo screws, pull apart different pieces. And it's usually pretty quick to just do a quick test. So I'm going to do that right now, make sure the computer starts up properly, and then keep going. All right, so I screwed in my power supply and everything has been set up. So now all that's left to do is put the cover back on. I've hooked it up one last time to the monitor and the power just to make sure that it works. Let's check it really quickly. And it does work. Make sure that it starts booting. Perfect. All right, and that's some simple directions on how to fix your computer if it stops working and how to do a proper analysis of what's going on.